Well, hey, round two conversations, Chad. We actually had a great conversation this morning. Too bad we weren't rolling at that one. But after our last conversation, you had kind of talked about you wanted to, before we got into the steps, to I don't know, to kind of talk about you know what is an alcoholic, and then talk a little bit about spiritual experiences and maybe touch on some tradition stuff. And I don't know, depending on where we get to, maybe we'll jump into step one today. But kind of one of the things. So, Chad, I think first start off, which is like, why did you think it was important to kind of define what an alcoholic is, and then let's get in and talk about what that is.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the way that, and thanks for doing this, by the way. It was a lot of fun the last time we did this, so I'm really glad we're doing this. I think it's one of the first problems that that Alcoholics Anonymous had ran into before it was ever even Alcoholics Anonymous was the what is an alcoholic problem. Like, there's a lot of people have a lot of ideas about what an alcoholic might be, and one I thought, say, before I ever came into recovery, I thought an alcoholic was like my stepdad, or so some of those traits, like just bombastic and really just ups and downs like crazy,
Drinking every day, living under a bridge, all
right.
sorts of stuff like that, right?
Yes, and like a homeless, all that different kinds of stuff. And so, that's I think one of the first problems that people would run into is people have an idea about what an alcoholic is, and it was one of the first things that I even like for like, I don't know, maybe probably a year or so into Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't even really know. It wasn't clear to me what an alcoholic was. A lot of it was just me saying, yes, I'm this, or yes, I'll do that. They were just kind of going along with stuff to make nice, because I wanted to have as smooth of a ride as possible while trying to do this recovery thing, so I don't go to prison and stuff. And I didn't feel at the time, it wasn't really on my radar to have really any real deep understanding of anything, really, other than because I just really wasn't. It just really wasn't. It didn't seem interesting to me. It didn't seem important until later, because the problem is that I ran into is when it came time to try to help another alcoholic. I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know. I felt like, man, I'm really, like, something is off. There's something. I'm not doing this justice. I'm not really serving this person in the capacity that something was just whispering to me those types of things. Like, man, there's something seems like it's not working. And so then I started really trying to pay attention. Like, I would go out, I'd go on YouTube and just listen to AA speakers like crazy, dude. Like, because you could do this. They're all over the place. They're on YouTube and they're on, Spotify, and there's playlists all over the place. And people are, bye, honey.
Bye, honey.
Bye. People are just sharing their stories. Like, they might, somebody might record it or whatever and then upload it to the internet, and that's how we get these things. People don't get paid to share their stories. They're just people get invited to come out and speak because they have a really compelling way of telling their story. There's an attractive thing about it. They're just really fine-tuned at telling their story, and that's such a great gift. So I started listening to these guys and gals, and I started in that way. I started hearing a lot more breakdown of what an alcoholic was, and then one day it was like this idea about this allergy clicked. I was like, oh, that was like, probably a year or two in, something like that. It's hard to remember exactly now when exactly that was, but it was something like that. So yeah, and there's a couple of reasons too that that I think it's important to talk about this as it relates to Alcoholics Anonymous, because the first thing I want to do before we get into the explanation of what an alcoholic is I do want to touch very briefly on the idea that around what AA can do for somebody and what it can't do for somebody. Just because, because we do talk, I know sometimes PVK will throw out comparisons to Alcoholics Anonymous and how he'd like Estuary to be something like that, or you'll hear stuff like that once in a while. And even I'll make reference to AA as it relates to Estuary and stuff like this. But AA isn't for everybody. And it's important to kind of make that distinction, because like I wouldn't send like just anybody to AA. Like I wouldn't recommend that anybody walk through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, because there's two key components. First of all, it's the first step, which is the admitting powerless over alcoholism. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our life had become unmanageable. And then the 12th step, which is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in a lot of areas. So there's the bit around identification is paramount, because and this is what I learned about AA too, and storytelling is even though, like, say, Lance, say you're telling me your story, and we've done this, you'll tell me your story, and like I can't relate to every single piece of your story, but I can really identify, like, say, even if I can do this better when I'm new. I can identify if you're doing it well, if you're telling your story well, in the way that I understand it to be done. If you're telling your story well, I, as the new guy, should be able to identify, oh, that's what I have. That's what we mean about alcoholism. That's and so I can identify with you, and I can start to get like better footing at what I'm really up against, what I'm dealing with. And I can also start to begin to understand how there's other people here who have been exactly where I am. And I know this based on the little fine things that, that's so important. So I wouldn't send like somebody who's an overeater to AA, because like I'm not, I don't identify with in that way, right? But like I identify, after having some time, I identify with having a spiritual malady. Now that's because I've spent some time with the work and I understand what the real problem is. But as a new person, it was hard enough for me to identify with as being an alcoholic.
Right. So I think a lot of people realize the 12 steps is a spiritual design for living that can help anyone.
Yes.
But in Alcoholics Anonymous, our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And I know you want to maybe talk about traditions and everything else. And the thing is, what unites us is we have this common allergy, this common thing that happens to us when we put, alcohol in our system, that kicks off this phenomenon of craving, that any person would just say, why doesn't they just stop? Like, you're going to lose your family, your job, you're hurting yourself. How can you not see this? And so the thing is that in our meetings, we try to limit our sharing and our storing and our problems as it relates to alcoholism. So it's about coming into the fellowship with a group of people that have this common problem of alcoholism. And that's why there's Gamblers Anonymous. That's why there's Overeaters Anonymous. And so, again, we're here because we have this particular thing that happens to us when we put alcohol in our system. For whatever reason, those of us who are chronic, that it does something to us and puts us in this state, the doctor's opinion talks about we're restless, irritable, and discontent until we can get that sense of ease and comfort for that first drink. And we will follow that down to the bottoms of society. But yeah, because I think that's really important. And I know you've said that, and kind of trying to, where people try to put a fine point on that, is like Alcoholics Anonymous, like our experience is, because I don't have a problem with overeating. I eat too much, but I don't have that eating disorder problem. And so I can relate to powerlessness and seeking God's will and made a decision and fourth and fifth, all that sort of stuff. But my connection with you is when you share things or other people, and they always say, look for the similarities, not the differences in stories. There are things that you say and you do. I'm like, oh yeah, like I can live that and I can do that. So that's why it's really important to understand that it's Alcoholics Anonymous that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's paramount. And this is why, like in the book, it says, in the doctor's opinion, actually, it says that these men may well have found a solution to thousands of similar situations, something like this. Can't remember the exact quote, but he kind of, like this Dr. Silkworth, and I'll get into who that is, but he kind of predicted that would happen. And it's very interesting. So, and I'm kind of a weirdo, and I think I'm kind of a weirdo in this way, that I also don't believe, like, this isn't meant to be controversial, but I do believe in the primary purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is one alcoholic helping another alcoholic stay sober. It's like, that's it, period. Like, I don't believe in, I personally don't necessarily believe in giving marital advice or advice on like how to raise your kids, or like, there's a guy I work with, a guy, a sponsor, he's like, I was going to go buy this electric bike. What do you think I should do? And I was like, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
go ahead. Like,
Yeah, let's get.
He's like, you're my sponsor. I'm like, yeah, and I'm not your babysitter, and I'm not your drill sergeant. What I
says we're not your banker, I'm not your taxi.
Right.
Yeah.
And I could do some of that. Like, I've just, like, a bunch of people have lent me money and helped me out. Just like I could do that too. But like, when somebody comes to expect those kinds of things, sorry, dude, like, you're putting stuff first where this should be first. And the idea is, let's try and get you geared towards aiming at these principles first.
Right. So, okay, let's start unpacking this. So you got a new guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the good way to do is to talk about how you would walk through that.
Yeah.
But when someone comes, you're starting to meet, someone comes up to a meeting, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, Chad, I need some help. They tell me I'm supposed to meet with someone. I don't know if I'm an alcoholic or not. And as you sit down with someone else going through the book, what are those things that you approach to kind of help someone figure out if they are an alcoholic and are in need of this program?
Right. So the process for me basically starts out with, so the first day, we're probably not going to read. What we are going to do is sit down. I'm going to sit with them. Maybe we'll go get coffee or something. Maybe we'll just go sit out in the park and smoke cigarettes and shoot the shit and just talk a little bit. I want to know where this guy thinks he is. Right. And so, like, I'll ask him, well, do you think, are you alcoholic? And he'll say one of a couple things. He'll say, oh yeah, I'm definitely alcoholic. And then I'll ask him, well, what does that mean for you? He's like, well, I got in trouble and I ended up getting this DUI. I got this and that, and I had all these problems, and so I'm an alcoholic. I'm like, okay, well, those are things that are caused by my character defects and my alcoholism. Those don't make me alcoholic. Or
Right.
And so that's one thing that'll happen. Or another thing will happen. Well, they'll say, well, I'm not really, I don't really, I'm not really alcoholic. I drink once in a while, but I have this other problem, and it might look like heroin or something like this. And um, and and so then we'll pause because I want to really start to pick apart what that, ask him what that means, because he may very well be alcoholic, but he doesn't believe it. And I also found it's not my job to convince somebody that they are alcoholic, right? So and this is a problem that has come up a lot in modern AA, where we say a drug is a drug is a drug is a drug, and I just don't believe that's true. Because I've worked with a lot of guys and encountered lots of guys that are brought in from the sober living facility, and they're like 19, 22, 25, somewhere in there, and they they just want to get off the street, and they might have had an overdose or something, and they're like now they just found a nice spot that's going to hook them up with a place to live and a place and some food and stuff, and they have a couple things. They probably have a good beginning, or they got a nice place to rest, right? And
So you're trying to weed your way through that. So you try ask them questions, probably exposed to them like, well, people aren't alcoholic, get DUIs and have consequences, and do stupid things, right? So kind of figuring those things out. What are those things you try to hone in as it thinks about doctor's opinion? What are those things that you want to try and expose to them?
Well, so I'll ask them. Well, first of all, yeah, we'll sit down eventually we'll get to a point where we'll sit down with the doctor's opinion, which is the beginning of this book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the doctor's opinion, this guy named William Silkworth he was like this doctor that worked at this basically a jitter joint, a dry out joint in New York. And he tripped over something very interesting. He tripped over this idea of the difference between a chronic alcoholic and an acute alcoholic. And because he noticed that both of these guys kind of look the same, right? What would happen is and this is what I'll tell guys, right? Because I'll give them a little bit of background on this language about the allergy and stuff, because it's very strange. It's like, where does this stuff come from? So I'll get to talking with them and I say, this is how the allergy came about, the idea of the allergy. So what happened was Silkworth was working at this facility for like however many, probably a decade or two, before there was ever any solution to alcoholism. You had to kind of have money to get into the place, but you would get in there and they would dry you out, and they would do belladonna treatment. They would do, maybe shock therapy, all sorts of different kinds of stuff to try to treat alcoholism. They didn't really have any real solutions. But what would happen is, so they get these guys that would come in to rest their nerves, and he would notice a couple things. Some of these guys, in fact, most of the guys that would come in, they would dry out and get sober. They would leave, and they would never come back. And he'd do follow-ups on them, and they'd be doing great. Everything was fine, right? They just needed to be separated from alcohol, right? And then these other guys, about, let's just say 10% of these other guys, they would leave, things would be going well, and they would drink again, and they'd come back in worse condition. And this was repeated over and over. And so he started to think, what is the difference? Because when these guys both come in, they look exactly the same. He's like, what is going on? And he had this idea, like, maybe there's like an allergy or something. Like, something different, right? Because these guys over here can stop or moderate. Like they could either stop or be able to drink responsibly, right? And then these other guys, when they drink, they go off the deep end, right? And so he started to think maybe there's like something that looks like, he had this what they call a theory of an allergy. So the allergy looks like once they have a few drinks, something happens where they don't break out into hives, but they would break out into an insatiable desire for more drinks, right? So they break out into more drinks, and so the guys who were chronic alcoholics, he found that these guys were the guys that had this thing that looked like an allergy, where once they start, they couldn't stop. And then once they stopped, they couldn't stop starting. So they would always end up going back to it, right? It was like always this thing like that. So that piece of information is probably one of the most basic and important pieces of information that Alcoholics Anonymous has to offer the world. And it really it changed the world.
Yeah, and so in the doctor's opinion, there's a couple things I'll just read here. Is he's talking about these allergic types. We believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. And then to come down here, what I really like this part of it is it says, talking about men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. We don't like how it tastes. You're lying to yourself if you like how it tastes. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to this desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery, the hopelessness.
Yeah. No, yeah, that, and this is the thing. So another thing I'll go into when talking with the guy in the beginning is I'll share with him how when I first came to AA, there was this it was like 3 months in or something, and I was at this group where they would do a main speaker, and then they do like 2 10-minute speakers, and they had me as a 10-minute speaker, and I was like all excited and weirded out by this and all this stuff, and I don't remember. The only thing I remember saying was, I said, if I'm honest with myself, I never liked alcohol, and that it did nothing but cause problems. And like when I look back on that statement, it's just so bullshit. It's such full of shit, because I loved alcohol. Like,
you love that sense of ease and comfort.
Yes, I mean, so alcohol did something for me. It helped get me connected, right? And I was in the beginning, again, I was so afraid to admit something like that, because, who knows why, but I was just so terrified to admit that I actually loved alcohol, right? And after doing some work, I realized I really, really loved alcohol. It helped me to feel like a person, helped me get connected. And when something has that kind of pull for you, like alcohol had for me, you're going to chase it, because it brings such a power into my life that makes things worthwhile. Like it kind of solves the meaning crisis, I guess. You know what I'm saying? It really
Yeah. And
and
that's why he refers to this need for an entire psychic change.
yes.
Because it is your higher power. It's your God. It is a spiritual experience. I know for some people, and this is since I'm the allergic type and you are too, everyone feels the sense of ease. Alcohol gives you a feeling. Now, some people actually, like my mom, like she never liked the effects of alcohol. Like she didn't like it. Didn't like the way it made her feel. Don't understand that whatsoever.
Yeah.
But that sense of, like I had talked about last time, and you and I kind of resonated on this, is like the first time I really drank, the whole world opened up for me. Like it did things in me, fireworks, like you say, spiritual experience. I mean, it did things in me that I have never experienced in any other thing. And like I had played sports and had great winning moments and had these great these euphoric moments. Nothing, I can just say, nothing compared to me to that feeling that I would get. And for me, the whole, like when it talks about the spree, emerging remorseful, never do it again, I'll just only drink beer, or I'll just only do this, or I'll only drink on weekends. Like when I saw that, what I realized for me was that I was this allergic type that once I started, I couldn't stop, didn't want to stop. And I found myself in this cycle. And as much as I had this sense of, I don't want to keep doing these things, I was without defense once I took the first drink.
Yeah. Well, right. And that's, so the people who are non-alcoholic might be listening to this and think like I think about the overeater or the gambler. Well, just stop. Why don't you just stop? Right? Or like maybe the heroin addict, dude, just stop. Just don't do that. But what you can't see is, again, somebody like me whose spiritual sickness can be solved by a few sips of alcohol, right? You better believe that I'm going to do it. And I could lie, and I could try and lie to myself and convince myself that it's not true. But the reality is, when I look at my experience and all the times I had tried to get separated from alcohol, right? Like on my own, without a solution in place, like I can't manage life. Like I don't understand how people, like I couldn't understand how like somebody could wake up in the morning and then go to work, and then they come home from work and they have dinner with the family. They might watch whatever, Frasier or something, and then
Frasier.
yeah, and then like they
Have
they
a couple drinks and they're okay.
or even just like or have no drinks and just go hang out with the family, watch some TV, have dinner, go to bed, wake up in the morning, do it all over. And I didn't understand how people could do that successfully, right? Without something to
Right.
to help them to be a part of it. And so yeah, I mean, in the back of my mind, I always have this idea, and it's so normal to me that I would always have this idea that it will always work. That's the delusion, that it'll work. And that's what it says. It says that this sensation is so elusive that while I admit it's injurious, I can't differentiate the difference between true and false.
Right.
It's so elusive. It's like, man, but I really think I just get it. But really, I just brush my fingers over against it and it's off again. Right. And I might be able to have that moment, that elusive moment, for that long. And then it's gone. But see, now here's the thing. Now I've started drinking, right? Because I got this sense, or I got this restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness going on inside of me, and I'm trying to stay separated from alcohol. I'm trying to be a good person. I'm trying to just live my life, and I haven't been drinking, and life's stacking up. Not just bad life, but good life too. Like days are stacking, and it's either, and I can't seem to manage how I feel around this. I can't seem to just change my mind to be okay with this life. And what happens is the stuff starts to stack up, and I need relief. And
Right.
in my mind, I know this will work, right? And so then I take this desperate experiment and I drink again, even for this long. Because again, I'm not stupid. I know what the consequences are going to be. But part of me feels like I might be able to bypass those consequences this time. Right?
Right.
The
And I
delusion.
think, yeah. And so I think when you talk about that, the spree, emerging remorseful, finding yourself on the merry-go-round, trying all these different ways, not being able to get rid of that restless, irritable, and discontent feeling. Like I say, good things can be happening, bad things.
Yeah.
And we talked about this morning, which is, when you'll be in a first step, and if you hear someone come in and they start to share their story, and it's like, well, I really only drink on the weekends, and all of a sudden you start hearing these things, you're like, ooh, that's that thing of like, you can kind of see that coming out. And I don't define whether someone's an alcoholic versus someone who you can tell is totally utter destroyed, and that sense of they know they're hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
Something inside tells them, I keep doing this over and over and over, and I can't stop. And they may not have the words to articulate it, but they have this craving.
Yeah.
That sets them apart, and they've tried this, that, and the other, and they literally know. That you just sense that they're so desperate that they realize, like, I'm out of options. And it's that desperation and that hopelessness, like you talked about this, I've heard you talk about this before, which is really someone who's new coming in and you're trying to work with them, is you really want them to tie into this. If you really have the allergy, that's a hopeless state of being.
Yes.
And it ties into the powerlessness of the first step, right?
Yes. So I'm glad you brought up the craving. So that's, again, this allergy is tied to, so these are all kind of, whatever, keywords, or what would you call those, buzzwords. So we have the allergy, which looks like, once I start, I can't stop. And that's also known as the phenomenon of craving. So the way that Alcoholics Anonymous talks about craving is a lot different than the rest of the world understands craving, right? So like the rest of the world out there might be like, man, I'm really craving a piece of pizza today, or man, I'm craving some, I don't know, I have this craving for something, right? But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, once I start, it kicks off something inside of me that sets off this insatiable desire for more. That is the physical craving that we're talking about. So once I'm separated from alcohol, once I'm truly separated from alcohol, I will be separated from the craving, but I will be left with the obsession of the mind, right? So those are different things. Like, here's another way. The best way I ever heard this described, the craving, the best way I've ever heard the craving described was, you and I right now are under the spell of a craving, and it's called air. But you don't realize it, right? But if somebody were to come up behind you and put a bag over your head and take your air, you would suddenly realize that you are craving air, right? And so that's how this craving bit, that's how the language around craving works in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So that's the first, as you said, the powerlessness of alcoholism. This is like, once I start, I can't stop, and I can't seem to know, I don't understand why either. It's for some reason, it makes sense too, right? Because it's like, it's 7 o'clock and I'm drinking like it's last call, right? I drink, and then as I go into the evening or into the day, like I drink more and more and more, almost faster. It's very peculiar.
And that's why the best laid plans don't work. So
right.
One of the things that happens is, like, I'll drink until it's gone. I'll drink until the sunrise comes up. I'll drink until it runs out. I will say I'm only going to have 2 or 3, but I've got to get to bed early because I got a early meeting, or I got to do something. And all of a sudden it's 3 a.m. and I'm still going. And I know rationally, like there's willpower, like I don't want to do that.
Right.
It's not, it's this thing that once you kick it off, it's, I heard it described in treatment, like some people have an off switch.
Yeah.
Like they have an off switch.
Yep.
Particularly a non-problem drinker, just someone else. There's this thing where they get to 3, 4, I look at this as I talk to some people, they're going to laugh. They're like, they're in 4, that's a lot. But, 2, 3, 4, they're like, oh, I'm done.
Maybe even 5 or 6.
Yeah. But there's just something
Yeah.
clicks off and they're like, oh, nope. Where that just is like, it's almost like it just gets the things lubricated. And as soon as I want that, once I have 4, I want 30.
Yes. Yep.
Literally, I want 30.
That's what the doctor's opinion, right? Where you're reading there, it says, the men and women like the effects produced by alcohol. They're restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience a sense of ease and comfort that comes by taking not 1, not 2, but a few drinks, right? Because I've had moments where I've been able to have 1 or 2, and then I'm like, man, I ain't fucking feeling it right now. That very rare. I just was like,
No,
not.
but it happens. Me too. Yeah.
But now I look at that. That doesn't, like, I would never toy with that today because it's like, what's the point? And that's just no way, dude. I can't have 3 if I don't have 1. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
And why that's important to understand is, for me, what it was is all this time to figuring out a way that I could somehow drink successfully. I had to understand, nope, I'm mentally and bodily different. Like there's something going on in me that is different than other people. And there is nothing, literally there's no different way or willpower or knowledge or faith, or there's nothing. I'm fighting against something that I have absolutely no control over once I have alcohol in my system.
Right. This is why AA makes such a big deal about AA, right? And this is why guys like us are like, this is crazy, right? And especially if you stick around a little bit and you like start to pay attention to some of the history, because like since man has been crushing grapes, this problem has existed, right? And it doesn't exist for everybody who drinks, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference between a heavy drinker and an alcoholic, but this problem has always been around. And the problem has seldom been solved, if ever. And then, in 34, 35, a couple of guys, again, accidentally trip over a solution. That's why it was such a mind-blowing experience for them when they counted 42 people staying sober, because it's like, this shouldn't be happening.
Right.
So I talk a lot about that, especially the newcomer, because we don't know what we're up against. Again, when I came into AA, I just thought, whatever, dude, who gives a shit? It's AA. It's always going to be here. It's always been around. It's like, no. And again, this is why it's so important that I stick to the traditions, because I want to protect something that is so young and has the potential to easily go away. We don't want to mess with that, because, I got nephews and stuff. Hopefully I'll have kids. And I want AA to be around for them. So I don't want to be messing with this thing. I just want to do what they do. I just want to do what they do. I don't need to improve it. I don't need it. They already made all the mistakes. I get to have my own life inside of this process, and one that's full and bigger than I could have ever imagined or planned for. So I want to just do what they do. But yeah, so that's the bit around that, the powerlessness and the mental obsession too, right? This is where my life could become unmanageable. And there's another part that you read in there, the first bit that you read, where it says their problems pile up on them and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. Can you read that thing again real quick? Because in there, the secret little first step layout, which is quite good.
Yeah. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve.
Yep, that's all at powerlessness and unmanageability wrapped up into one little perfect paragraph.
Yep.
You know,
And so that's the key. And so again, because we want to kind of tease this out, and we'll talk about, people want to maybe see how this might work in church, or, we do estuary, which is, that's where people get together to kind of solve, if they're having, really talk open about things, where people can ask the big questions, the things they're struggling with or whatever. Is one of the secret things about, not secret sauce, but one of the most important things about AA is that we all have this particular allergy.
yeah.
And our stories disclose in a general way what it used to be like dealing with the allergy, what happened to me, what happened to bring me into this program, and what it's like now. And so this allergy plays out mentally, spiritually, how we live, how we move, how we be. I mean, it's crazy, because you can sit in these meetings, and as we share our stories, the outcomes might be different, or the actions we take might be a little bit different. There's a thread that comes out of it, that runs kind of throughout everything, kind of the river that runs through it. And so Alcoholics Anonymous are for those of us that have this particular disease. And there seems to be, and this is something that's different, I think we all have a spiritual malady, but it appears as if for us chronic types, the only thing that cures us is seeking God.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
You can go to cancer, like a doctor can cure cancer. You can do different things, and I don't know where that is in terms of the other, like overeaters or gamblers or whatever. I mean, it works, and they can have their stories, and I love that there are those 12-step programs around this. But there's something about us in alcohol that does this wild. It's unique. It is unique. And heroin's, like, there's Narcotics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous, because those things are very particular to certain people, and that's why they get together and have their meetings. And you have to realize, and that's the problem. So we get led to hopeless, like I'm this spree, I can't stop, everything's astonishingly difficult, I know I need that ease and comfort, and then you lead me to this place and I'm screwed because I can't stop drinking. And you're telling me I can't ever beat this thing because I got this allergy, but I find myself in this endless rut. How the heck? What am I supposed to do now, Chad?
Right. Well, there's a spot in the doctor's opinion where it says the only thing that we found that is most effective is abstinence, and it's like, well,
yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, like abstinence is like doing time. It's like once I put the plug in the jug, the clock starts ticking and I don't even know it. And so that's why it's so weird. That's why we have 12 steps. If this was a put a plug in the jug program, we would have a half-step program. It would just be like, well, I'm powerless over alcohol, I'm done with this shit, and then move along. But it doesn't work that way, right? Because it's interesting because Bill Wilson, the co-founder, he later ended up writing to Carl Jung. They never met, but he did write to him. And he ended up asking him, Bill ended up asking Carl Jung about his experience that he had with this guy, Roland Hazard, who, as in the book of Alcoholics, and there's this little portion in the book that and I think it's in There's a Solution. And in the chapter, There's a Solution. Anyhow, so Bill ends up asking Carl Jung about this situation, and then he's like, what do you think of, something along the lines of, what do you think about this? And Carl Jung was like, yeah, this makes sense, because the alcoholic is, he's always had this longing and desire, this spiritual longing and spiritual desire, right? And this is why it's kind of interesting how alcohol is referred to as spirits. And so there's like this phrase, I can't remember exactly what it is, spiritist, spirits or something like this. It's some weird Latin phrase where the I don't know. It's basically talking about the alcoholic's longing is a longing to have communion with God, right? But there's like something blocking him, and with us, what we find really is selfishness and self-centeredness. It's like this thing that's blocking me from being able to really surrender and to actually seek God. So yeah, so that's always very interesting to me.
Right. So, okay. So I think people have probably gotten a good idea of what alcoholism is and the uniqueness of how it manifests itself in those of us who truly are of the chronic type. So we've gotten to this point. Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing on that. One more really good illustration is we've seen this a lot where somebody can step away from alcohol and be separated from alcohol for a period of time, right? A long period of time. And then I've heard this a lot where they end up picking up again and they drink again. And they say, it was weird. I picked up right where I left off.
Well, so part of my story, so as we mentioned before, I've been sober most of my adult life. And I wasn't a guy who would get 60 or 90 or whatever. Like I had 5.5 years, first time 25 to 31. And then I was just kind of peeking out. I was a little bit of a weekend warrior and thought I had it licked, but I was still drinking alcoholically, but I was spacing it out.
Yeah.
But I told, in the last time, like I told you, the first time I went out on success. The first time I went out, starts off with a 6-pack and then a 12-pack and then back for another 12-pack. And then I picked up right where I left off and I drank, 30 beers. And the funny thing is that, Chad, I was not falling down stupid drunk. Oh, I felt great. I mean, yeah. I felt great because it'd been 5.5, almost 6 years.
And
but that first, I went right back to it. And literally, I was able to have a conversation with someone because I'm not telling. By the way, I wasn't telling anyone. Because people knew I was in recovery because I was telling everyone, everything else. And I got a call. People had no idea I drank. I talked to someone at the end of that after 30 beers, and I sounded just fine. That's crazy. But yeah, so the point is that a weird thing about this allergy is it goes dormant. It doesn't recede. And the minute you feed it the alcohol again, you're right back where you started. Like people have talked, there was a guy who was sober for 17 years, a good friend of mine, Vietnam vet, just love him to death. And Mike S. And, he went out for 17 years and immediately just boom, like after 17 years of good sobriety, sponsoring people in the program, after 17 years, he was right back where he started. And so there's this really weird, again, and that's why if you have a family member and you're just so perplexed, like what is this? Or if you're someone who's struggling with this and you're so perplexed, that's why I think why you wanted to bring out, but as we get into these things, we're talking about AA is why what is an alcoholic is a really important thing because it's that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no attached to the allergy. It's once the switch is on, all bets are off. That can also look another thing too. So there's a guy, a sponsor. He would only drink every other month or something. But when he drank alcoholically, right? Yep. And he was baffled each time he drank. Right? He wasn't drinking even on the weekends. He was just like he would get this restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness. He just wanted to take the odd job. And he would drink, and he wouldn't be able to control how much he drank when he drank. He would wake up forceful and shit. So, again, he has this allergy. He has this phenomenon of craving. He has the mental obsession where he can't just stay away from it. And so that qualifies him. This is the simple thing that qualifies me as being alcoholic. On page 45, I think it talks about. It gives the perfect little kind of definition here. I just want to read it because before we move forward on this, because it just seems so simple. It's like, oh yeah, I see that, but And so when I'm working with the guy, I want to go through and we want to find these instances in our story. Where did this look like? Where you drank and you couldn't control it, or you couldn't stay away? Because it's easy to just say, yeah, I did that, or yeah, I didn't do that. But I want to know exactly. Let's talk about this. Because then I can start to give him a name of what he has. I can help him start to give him a picture of what exactly he has by putting it in. And it's very important that we do that. And because then it becomes personal. It's like, oh, I do have that. Like we've had this where a buddy of mine go in the detox, and so this is the best moments in detox where we're doing exactly kind of what we're doing here. Only we're sharing a little more in depth in our stories around like the allergy and the obsession of the mind and the phenomenon of craving and the obsession of the mind. And we're talking about those things, but while we're talking about that, we're telling like our story with these bits and pieces of allergy and obsession. We're just hitting this over and over and over for like an hour, just different ways of talking about this. And the best thing is when somebody will, all of a sudden they'll come in. Like one time we came in there, he's like, I'm in here for anger management. So he's in like a facility. He's like, I'm in here for anger management. And we're like, okay.
Yeah.
Halfway through that thing, he was just so quiet, and all of a sudden he sits up. He's like, what did you just say? He's like, say that again. I got that, dude. And when you have a situation like that, it's like, dude, that's so nice to hear, because like you're doing your job as somebody who's trying to carry the message, right? Because it's like, wow, dude. When somebody sits forward, when they were in there for anger management and they walk out with alcoholism, like I wasn't trying to, I was just sharing my story. So here's the definition I really like about an alcoholic. It says, we hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Right? This is one of the most poignant pieces of the whole book. And it doesn't say that if you're suffering from this, you'll just be able to change your mind or do some cognitive exercises or whatever. You're not going to go to the gym. You're not going to get a job and you're not going to just go start paying your bills. That's not going to solve your problem. You need a spiritual, only a spiritual experience will suffice. And it's, well, right after that, it's like, wow, if one who feels he's atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. Yeah. But to continue on, it's like this is the dilemma. What do I do? Do I go on to the alcoholic death? How bad is it? Or accept spiritual help? And that's difficult, man.
Right. And that's why, like you talk about, telling the stories is so important. Because, my story has been, and I just was racking my brain, I never, even in my worst, where I had some freedom, whatever, I never was a person who drank every day. And as long as I didn't drink whiskey, I never blacked out. And my dad drank every day at night to a blackout kind of mumbling, couldn't understand him drunk, and he, whatever. My mom worked nights. And so, well, that's what alcoholism looks like to me, right? In some ways earlier on when I thought, well, I don't do it, but I never got to that state, but some people do. And so, that's where telling your stories, but I can relate to the fact of the one thing that was for certain was, because I could go periods of time too. Like I literally could go, like I said, I've been sober most of my adult life. Now I haven't been active in AA most of my adult life, but I might go 3 months without drinking, Chad, just because, work, kids, whatever else, things were going on. But then I had a free weekend. And that free weekend, oh my gosh, like I would just go ballistic. Yeah. And I wouldn't even intend to be going ballistic, but it would just, it just would happen. And so
my grand sponsor says it's like having sex with a gorilla. You ain't done till the gorilla says you're done.
That's so good. What's really important is we have this connection. We have this primary purpose. We have this hopelessness that sets us on this path to let go of our old ideas, to seek God without boundaries, to put all of our faith behind us and everything else, to go into, to go on this pathway to find God. Because it says, like, the purpose of the steps is to help you find God.
Yep.
I've heard a lot of old timers say that. And so when I think about churches or estuaries, one of the big problems I realize is that without that hopelessness and that desperation, it's really hard to get people to actually be willing to go through the process you have to go through in AA.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wouldn't take the. I mean, I think this is the importance of really understanding a first step, and we call it. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we're alcoholic. I mean, and I like it says we learned. Like that's a tough lesson. But if I don't if I don't grasp this idea, like if I don't concede that I can't do this, why would I do any of this work? And because really, I haven't really grasped the first step. Like, here's a good example. A buddy of mine and I, like I said, I'll just always refer to him as my buddy. He was my best man. We go to detox together all the time. This is one of our great joys in life is to go in on a Sunday and try to carry a message of detox. So it's the best, dude. So we're in there and we're doing our bit. We're doing this thing, and this one gal, she's like, this sounds good. Now earlier in the evening, before we really started getting to work, she says, I've never been to AA, but I go to this like religious thing. My boyfriend and I go to like this religious recovery thing, and we really like it. It's really good. But meanwhile, she has 2 kids. Okay. She's in detox for the umpteenth time, and she's addicted to alcohol and crack, right? And she's never attended a meeting. She didn't know anything about the steps. So we're talking about this, and we're really trying to lay on the idea that there is no bottom to hell. Like there really isn't. And you think this is like, you think you have a bad, don't worry, it always gets worse. And you hear this. There is no bottom to hell. I mean, it's like, and you'll forget how bad it was. So anyways, we're doing this thing. And she's like, this sounds really interesting. I got to check out these steps and these meetings and stuff. And one of the first things that she comes out with after this, near the end of this conversation was, man, if I do these steps and I get sober, I can get some money together and I can get myself a pair of Jordans. Like, but you just said you have your kids taken away. It's like, to me, there's something off about that. There was something off about it because it's like, you're not focused on, you haven't been stripped of all hope. I just don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, there was nothing,
Right.
It just wasn't, it was like, oh, you just missed everything that we just said here.
Yeah. And I think, like we talk about, the result was nil until we let go of our old ideas. And there's this unifying thing that brings us together, this allergy. And that allergy leads us to a powerlessness.
Yeah.
Which then sets us on a path to work these steps. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was the one thing when I figured out, which is like, it's really hard for most people, and we call them normies, for the normies out there.
Yeah.
To really ruthlessly go after something. Because you have to, I mean, you got to ruthlessly go kind of root and branch. He talks, you know, rip these things. Like, you have to go after this, and you got to let all this old stuff go away, and you have to commit yourself into this program. Um, and that's one thing that I think is really hard to replicate for, like, people who are listening, like churches or whatever, everything else. Like, you do it, like there's a thing going on in AA that it doesn't exist in those other places, because people haven't reached that place of powerlessness.
Yeah.
And then the other thing would be, like, I know you brought this up and we talked about this in Estuary, was like, what's the primary purpose? Right? Because because there can be lots of primary purposes, which are good. Like, there are healthy, good primary purposes, whether it be in church or whether we talk about estuaries, or lots of different really healthy, good things. There are primary purposes which holds people together. Without a primary purpose, it's just all over the place. And why are we coming together? And what's that thing that we can relate to, so we can share our stories? So now, what's that common thread?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I find, because a lot of people, we're doing this because people ask questions in our, not just in our corner of the internet. This has been asked to me, pastor friends of mine all the time. It's like, hey, how do we do it like that? And I was like, oh boy, like, I don't know how you're going to get people to completely give themselves to this simple program. One. And then the second piece is that we have people that have been down the road in the path in years, and there's the fellowship that are far enough down the road that they can help bring you along. Now, that works in, like, discipleship, like in a really good, healthy church. You meet with a mature Christian, they start doing life with you. The best discipleship has nothing to do with the dogmas you're talking about. It's living life with one another and teaching you how to live, like, in my opinion. And so that model exists. But there's something about being saved from the shipwreck of this allergy and the destruction of this allergy that is this unifying thing that I just don't know how you can replicate it. And that's always been my problem.
Well, I guess for me, then it would have to boil down to understanding what is AA. I think it's really simple. It can be boiled down to AA is a process or a set of spiritual tools that get me to do some work and embody some work, like well, let's just go with some of the practical work. It's like a fourth step is inventory. Like, I inventory my life, and I have a certain set of parameters on the inventory. There's about 3 inventories that we're going to do inside of a fourth step, and there's certain things there, and I get to kind of a look at my life and like this inventory or map of my life. The next thing I do is I share that with somebody else. And then I go and I seek God, and I do all this different, like, open seeking. It doesn't say I have to believe, but it does want me to take some action. So I'll do that, right? Because it asks me to be willing to the best of my ability. So again, AA is a set of tools that I approach with willingness, and then I actually go out and clean up the past. I try and do daily seeking of my higher power through prayer and meditation. I try to be accountable to another alcoholic, preferably. I could, do it with my pastor too, or maybe somebody I'm doing discipleship with too. But it really helps with another alcoholic because they know exactly what is going on. And then I have to be willing to go out there and carry the message to another alcoholic. All those things are a set of tools that I actually actively work with that change me from the inside out. I think if you were to take those same sets of tools, if people, and again, back to the problem, it's like,
yeah, it's
like, hang on a second. Sorry about that. It's like, how do you convince somebody to use those tools? It's like, well, I don't know. It's weird. It is weird because I've asked people, like just regular Joes, or even people like, say, some people on Discord they're going through something, right? And it's like, well, I got a tool that would probably help you. Would you like to try a fourth step? Well, no. It's like, no, I don't think you want to do it then. I think you kind of are happy being miserable. I think
Yeah.
you're, like,
I,
you think that you could still manage your way out of it. And those are people who like believe. They're believers. Like,
yeah. Well, and I think one of the things I love, and this was in the daily reflections today, it was, and I remember reading this. This was about where you kind of talk. Spiritual life is not a theory.
oh
We
yeah,
have to live it. We have to live it, right? And then you shared something today. Let me pull that up. That quote you shared. Where he was talking about if someone is sincerely interested, this is if you're working with another alcoholic, if he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. And
does
so one of the things I do see is like I know listen, we know people in our circle that aren't alcoholics. People get on these amazing paths, and there are churches of all denominations and faiths where people seek and find a way to actually live it and not talk about it or think about it. They actually embody it. They're not living in rational modernity sort of things. That they're literally they found a way to break through. And thank God they don't have the allergy, so that works for them.
right?
You know, um, and so I think it is trying to figure out these tools, but trying to apply this to people, it's like that's why you came back to, and I don't think about God is like, okay, if you guys are wondering, I do think there's something about the primary purpose though.
Mhm.
That primary purpose becomes really important because you can get lost on a lot of things, and that can apply a lot of organizations, but without that primary purpose, and that's why I think you wanted to talk about what is an alcoholic and why is it AA, is that's the unique kernel, because I spent a lot of time trying to, and I did, like I mapped on biblical stuff over all the steps. It's all over the place, and I saw all this stuff, and I could see it applying in kind of religious ways or so on and so forth. But the one thing I always realized is that without that primary purpose, without that thing holding it together, it's just pretty hard to do that.
I think it's impossible because what'll happen is you get. This is why they wrote the book in the first place, because they did try to do this just word of mouth, right? And then what they found was pretty quickly it started. The message started to get watered down and shifted too much, and it was like just getting. And next thing you know, there's nothing. You can't see that you're not willing to take and and do what it takes to surrender, right? And like, so yeah, the primary purpose, it's the. I'll just read that tradition real quickly because so people understand what it is that I'm talking about exactly. Uh, Tradition 5 says each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Period. And part of so like the traditions were born out of Bill says that they were pounded out on the anvils of experience, which sounds like a pretty painful process, right? Because like this means that, because the traditions didn't come until later. So you first had these groups that were meeting up and trying to share a message, word of mouth, and then came the book, and that was for like so the word of mouth thing was for about 3 or 4 years, and then the book came, and about 5 years after that, then the traditions came, right? And then so that's all. The traditions came up because they started to notice a lot of infighting, and a lot of people were getting off into different things like politics or religion.
The primary thing wasn't the primary thing. And you hear this in a lot of things. Keep the primary thing the primary thing.
Yeah. And so they were getting all over the place, and it was causing division. And they realized we have to figure something out to keep us focused, because this is a matter of life and death, period. We can't afford to blow this thing up because, because I'm more interested in this than that guy is over here on that. It's like, no, none of that matters. None of it matters, dude. It doesn't matter to the point where I've been in business meetings at like a where we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with our group as we move forward, and you get some squabbles in there once in a while, and when the meeting's over, it's over. And when that business meeting is over, the squabble's done. We're back to carrying the message, because it was all about carrying the message in the first place, right? And so groups that don't follow these suggestions of traditions, they fall apart.
Right.
It just
Well,
can't
I think
withstand it.
Yeah, I think so. When you think about things like as people try and create organizations, one, they kept money out of it. They kept money out of it.
Yep.
No one's the grand poobah or the president. There is no leader.
No.
And that's hard for people because they develop what they think are ministries. I want this thing and I want to, and this is all stuff well and good, but again, how are you going to replicate that in AA? It's like, well, no, there are no leaders. There's a group conscience. And like how you said, it's a spiritual entity. Like all of this stuff is, everything is about God in the program.
Yeah.
Everything. God of your understanding. God is loving God as he expresses himself in our group conscience, which is another tradition, right? But it keeps all the human crap out of it. No politics. No, we're not going to take any positions on any of this stuff. There would be zero position. There's a zero position on any of the things we're fighting about today. Out. No conversation about it. It's out. Doesn't belong in here. And that stuff becomes very difficult to do.
Oh, totally. And I was just thinking about creeds, right? Like, so here's the interesting thing. If AA has had a creed, which it doesn't, but if it did, it would be, I admit I'm powerless over alcohol. So our creed, our credo is this, it's our greatest character defect, this thing that would kill us. That's the thing that really unites us, right? Because without that, I won't seek God. And so it's pretty interesting how, like, this admitting complete defeat, it's this thing that binds us, right? And then from there, it's like, whatever, we got these principles or these spiritual tools you could utilize, and these steps you could follow. And once you start to seek God with this process, I mean, I've seen people like myself. I didn't have any religious upbringing or anything like that, and they gave me some. I've seen atheists, like straight out atheists, pissed off at God, like have these amazing transformations. I've seen people still to this day who claim to be atheists and still, but they will follow the process of the steps, and they call the group their higher power. Fine. Right. I'm fine with all of it.
Well, the other thing is the other struggle you have is like the tradition of anonymity, right? Which allows us to be brutally honest, no masks,
right?
And the problem you have in a normal setting, okay. I tend to be pretty vulnerable. Probably it's hurt me in some places, but I tend to be pretty vulnerable, and I particularly, there are certain aspects of it depends, like in a one-on-one or certain places, I'll share my story, but so much in no matter where you're at, and there's a time and a place for everything. Like you don't need to put all your business on Main Street, okay? So but you have to have that trust, because the fact of the matter is, and too many times, like, unless you get a really, like, I've been in some really good men's group where we get raw in a Christian men's group, and we'll tell, but so much of the stuff is like you can't really tell people what's really going on. And gosh, if you're a pastor struggling with pornography, you can't be honest about that, because you're going to get fired. So it's there's this sense where, like, the total honesty, but the anonymity protects you. Like, there are a lot of things that prevent these outside organizations really the magic of AA, because, you know, a lot of what we talk about as this principles program is, and we talk about how it works, is like, you got to get rigorously honest, and you got to get rigorously honest. And you got to say it.
Right.
Like, you got to do it one-on-one. You know, there's certain things you might share with your sponsor that you may not talk to a meeting, but you need to get to the point where you're sharing this in a meeting, but that meeting's a sacred space and people don't share. Like, you've got to get brutally honest.
Yeah. Like my sponsor, he says, you ain't got to tell everybody, but at least somebody's got to know.
Yeah.
You know, it's
yeah.
We could talk about,
you're only as sick as your secrets, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about how, like, in the fifth step, it talks about we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, right? But I think I said this before. Those are all. I think that's a trinity of the same thing, of speaking it out loud, because I can tell myself that I'm telling God through prayer or whatever, but it hasn't really been consummated until it's coming out of my mouth and into your ears. That's how I outgrow fear. That's how I actually embody laying this spirit to rest, whatever this thing is that's inside of me. And really, it's the fear is what's killing me. It's not the thing. It's like this idea around it. Like, there's something that was on my fifth step that I left off, or there was something that was on my fourth step that I left off in a fifth step with my sponsor. And what it was I stole some quarters from a friend of mine while I was drunk and at his house. And I helped him look for him. And I was afraid to tell my sponsor that, because I was afraid of what he would think about me. I was afraid he wasn't going to pick me up for a meeting. So I had all these self-centered things that were separating me from being able to tell the truth and really tell the truth. And so, like, it wasn't until I was able to really do that where I was actually able to really consummate this idea of telling God, telling myself, and telling another person the exact nature of my wrongs. Right.
No, and I think that's important. Like, you mentioned something this morning we were talking. Listen, AA is not a self-help group.
Nope.
It is a we program. Like, there's a lot of self-help stuff going on out there. It's not a self-help group. It's a community group. And I'll tell you, it is super easy. It's super easy to just get on your knees and ask God for forgiveness. I can do that. Be honest, Chad, like, I can do that really easily.
Yeah.
What's really hard is sitting across from another human being and having to be willing to, you know, the pride, the ego, the fear, all that stuff, and be willing to say that. And, you know, part of that stuff, which is, you know, and I had this. I mean, there's some reticence, like, well, I don't need to. No, you don't have to have, from my perspective, you don't have to have a priest or something like this that has to be that model in order to be, you know, forgiveness if you're in a Christian model. But that step was grabbed out of confession. There is a power in confession, and it makes it real. And you better get honest with at least one person and one real human being in your life. And, you know, that's why the beauty of the fifth step is you should only give that to someone that you like. Some people use their priest or their pastors. That's fine. That's okay. Like, you can do that. But with that sponsor, you know, at least with one person, as long as you admit it to that, at least to one person, it seems like that the embodiment of that releases. Because a lot of people talk about coming out of their fifth steps. If they've done it fully, they talk about what they feared most telling anybody about themselves ever. Like 1,000 pounds are lifted off their shoulders.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh my, like the release of getting rid of all those things. And you have, and so, you know, that's such a critical part of I think just the spiritual life is you had better admit something. Now, be someone you can trust is going to keep it, that you can trust their confidence. They're not going to blast it on Main Street, but you had better get everything. Like in what we do on the nightly thing, is there something that you need to tell someone as a daily review? Like, you got to get that stuff out, because it eats us alive.
Well, I'm not somebody who could go out and be self-proclaimed humble person and start generating humility out of nowhere, right? I I have to do stuff to that's going to make me right sized. And and that's where I've had some of my these great experiences with God, is where I really get right sized, where it's like, I don't know, if I don't, there's a way I think about this. Like, if I don't take actions, take these actions of these so-called humbling actions, I will be humbled whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
So I can ask God to go with me, come with me, and give me the strength to do this, and then I go and I share this stuff, or I go out and make the amends that I don't want to make. Like the one of the other ones. that Here's a spiritual experience for you. So early on, I had done a fourth step to the best of my ability. It was kind of shoddy, and it was what it was. It was as good as I could get it at the time. I was doing the best I could. And so on that fourth step, I left off this thing about the quarters, right? And I had been kind of sleeping for a while on. I already did a fourth step, or I'm saying, I already did a fifth step, right? And so this is a couple months later, and I hadn't moved on to doing a eighth and ninth step. I'd been and I'm kind of going crazy inside. I can feel the restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness, kind of this self-centeredness welling up inside of me. And one day I'm sitting in this meeting on a Saturday morning, and in that, the reading for the beginning of that meeting says it talks about solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. Well, we need to go further. And if we don't, we may not overcome drinking. And I heard that, and all of a sudden something came to mind. I'm like, holy crap, dude. I left something off my fourth step. It was weird because what flashed in my mind was this thing about the quarters, and then this other event that happened. So I remember when I was first writing down on this fourth step, these two items came to mind, and then I thought they're not important, so I didn't write them down. And I thought the other thought that came along parallel with that was, my sponsor is going to think I'm a piece of shit if I tell him this. So I never wrote them down. And then I'm sitting in this meeting, all these months later, and this comes to mind, and I just totally forgot that I had done this. It was like I'm sitting in the meeting, and this memory, I'm like, oh shit, dude, I forgot about that, dude. And I go to my sponsor, he's sitting next to me. I said, hey, I left some stuff out on the fourth step. I'd like to talk with you after the meeting. Can we do that? He said, absolutely. So we go after the meeting. We're in the car, and I'm telling him about these quarters that I stole, and he's laughing at me and funny. And the second thing was there was a woman who, so when I was 16, 17, we did attend a church for a very small period of time. And there was a lady at that church who had asked me to come and clean out her barn for her, and she would pay me. So I go and I'm in that barn, and I'm cleaning out this barn, and I come across this box that has some old coins and old dollar bills, really old stuff, coins and dollar bills, and I stole them. And I traded them for weed or something like this. And then, so that came to mind on my fourth step, and I left it out completely until this morning where I'm at this meeting. So I'm telling him, and he says, great. You can begin your ninth step, and you'll do it today. And I said, oh, so I couldn't move forward until this happened. So I go home, I go on Facebook, and I get in contact with these people. And I get in contact with this lady, and she says, I tell her I'd like to talk with her, and she says, okay. So I talk with her, and I tell her what happened. And the first thing she says, was first thing she said was, I'd like to get my money back. The second thing she said was, I can't believe that was you who did that. She's like, I blamed my brother for taking that money, and I haven't talked to him in years because of that. And then the last thing she said was, thank you for sharing that with me, and I love you very much. And like, so, like, that's a spiritual experience. And if I'm unwilling to do that, I miss out on stuff like that.
Right.
And I miss out on an opportunity to try and make something right, and an opportunity for somebody to make something right with their other family member that I caused.
Right.
And
You had no idea about. Yeah.
No idea, dude.
Well, I think the thing that I like about you, and this is something we talked a little bit, we were just chatting this morning, is this is just that this thing's going to go on and on and on. Like, there's no end to this destination. You don't arrive at the end of the steps and you're all done. It's like all of us, we get this in life. This is a continual process of, our friend Sherry says, of becoming. And it's okay. Like, the timing's right when the timing's right. You didn't share it. But then when you had that pang, because you were still doing other stuff in the program, it bubbled up, and it just was your time. And more is revealed, more honesty, you're growing, you're getting healthier, and you have the opportunity to do that. And, I'm just right now getting ready. I started working with a new sponsor here about a year and a half ago, and I really wanted to go slowly through the steps. He sponsored a lot of men, and I really respect him. And so I used to, all the vim and vigor, and I'd rush through it, and I was as honest as I could be. Like, I'd share everything that was written down, but I'm just moving so quickly through things that I've really tried to move slowly. And I'm getting to the point now where, like, I've already done amends in the past, so I don't have to re-amend what I amended. Like, the amends I made with my parents about stuff, years ago, I don't have to revisit those because I've already done them. But there are new things, right? Just whether it be people in your life. And so that's literally where the process, where I'm at. And I'm really interested you shared that with me, is that I have gotten to this place where we were kind of camping out and working on things. But I talked to him. I'm like, hey, I just realized that where I'm at now is that I need to get out on the road and start making these amends. And he's like, yep, it's time now. So I'm working on my 8th step, because I've got to get out and do those things, in order to, and then again, the thing is, like, I don't even know this amend that I'm going to make with someone. I love that you shared, like, who knows where the repercussions of that are going to go,
Right.
But you have to be willing. And the other thing that I think you want to point out, which is really good, a lot of people say they're sorry.
Mm-hmm.
In the 8th step is made a list of all persons we harmed became willing to make amends to them all. And 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. It's not saying you're sorry. Like, it includes restitution.
Yes.
Like if you've taken money, then you better make sure you make the restitution right. Like, if you've a former employer and you feel like you didn't give them an honest worker, you got to be willing to go out, whatever that might take.
Yep.
And if someone in your amends asks you, like, I want to get paid back, well, then you're going to pay them back.
Yep.
You don't have the money, you better figure it out.
Yep. Clear direction and all that stuff. Very clear direction.
Yeah.
There's no skimping on, like all of the questions are answered. Like, you make out, like, you don't just, this is why, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, you think you might want to do this, and you've not gone through the rest of the work, I would ask somebody first. This is why we have a sponsor, because, like, here's what can happen if you make amends without having to do the work prior to. Okay, you can cause more damage and not know that you're doing it. There's a guy with when I say, like, I work with, I don't really like to use I only call my sponsor. I don't like to refer to myself as somebody who sponsors. I work with other men. So there's a guy I work with, And it was like early on in his process. And he comes to me, he says, dude, I did something great, dude. I want to tell you about it. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So he's like, I made amends. And he's like at step or something. And I'm like, oh yeah, what happened? He's like, well, there was this woman that I was sleeping with, and
Yeah, I was going to give this example. Go ahead.
yeah, it's like, and you know, her husband died, and I was married, and I wasn't really interested in her, but I was just kind of using her, and so I wanted to make amends to her. And what I did was I told her, I just want you to know that I was using you, and I apologize. And
Oh gosh. Oh no. Oh no.
why did you do that? She's like, what?
Right.
Dude, you don't do that. Like, so always run these things by your sponsor first, because this is why we have people who have been there. They understand the principles that we're aiming at. We don't want to be causing harm, like.
Yeah, and think about all the things that if you've worked the program, all the things that you've done leading up to that. That's except when to do so would injure them or others. Like there are times, and even talks about it in our book or stuff, like you might want to go get the guilt off you and just admit to something. Like, and that could be affairs or these sorts of other things, which could cause damage in other marriages. Like you slept with your best friend's wife and he doesn't know about it and everything else. Now, I don't know. Work with your sponsor about it. But you might just need to shut up.
Yeah.
And not go run and tell your best friend, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't know this, but I slept with Sandy. All of a sudden now you may have destroyed a marriage.
Yeah.
You know?
To save your own ass at the expense of others.
Exactly. And the other thing that what's been really interesting, but the one thing that's been good is I've been spending a lot of time, and one of the things I do, like they when you have a resentment against, like you're working on resentments, you're getting closer to God, you're working on your God consciousness, you're figuring out your patterns. And then one of the big things before you go make an amend is you've got to go in there with total forgiveness towards someone else. Like it's just you're owning your stuff. And these might be people that have harmed you too and done awful things to you. You've got to go in, no matter how they respond, but you need to go in there just purely looking at your side of the street and have to be in a place where you can give that amend without yeah, but you did this to me. And not just so you don't say the words. Like one of the things I've been doing is some folks that I had some resentments from, and I've harmed them, but they've really harmed me too.
Right.
Well, I've spent literally, like in an AA, they say, like if you have a resentment, just pray for them for 30 days. And what I've actually, a practice I've been doing now that has worked really well is like when I do the Jesus prayer, like I'll say the Jesus prayer for like my family and whatever, but like people I can tell I'm arguing with my head with them and that sort of thing. I literally will go around the prayer rope and say, Lord Jesus Christ, bless and have mercy on Joe. Lord Jesus Christ, bless and have mercy on Joe. As I'm doing that for that person, I know I'm asking, there's that thing happens to where I've got some amends that I'm getting ready to make now. I'm no longer having arguments with my head. Like I'm not harboring, like I'm finally in a spirit where I can literally go in and just own my side of the street and not worry about the responses, because they can tell me to go to hell.
Yeah.
Well, you should apologize to me and whatever. But the point is, but there's so much work that has to go in. So if you are like, if you need to get into some reconciliation and some stuff, like if you have a spiritual advisor or that good friend, like do some work before you do some of these amends.
That's why I'm looking forward to actually going through these steps with you, because there's some very important stuff that I missed for years in the fourth step that are vital. And I've only heard it pointed out by one guy, and like he's kind of taken this. He found this thing in the book that it brings it to life, and I'm like, oh, it changed everything on like my approach on this stuff, because without this bit of information, I couldn't really go through the rest of the work. Really, it's so important, and that's why. So you'll hear a lot of folks say they'll refer to in a fourth step, they'll say, "What was your part?" Well, it never says that. It doesn't say, "What was your part?" It says, "What were your mistakes?" The only time it ever mentions your part in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous is when it's referring to the ninth step. It says, "Once you have made the amends, you have done your part." And so I'm very, very kind of rigid on those thoughts, those ideas, because we just will wiggle our way out of these things and find ways to protect ourselves from the truth about ourselves.
And that's
So,
why the we program is important in that sponsor,
yes,
because there also are some things like I've seen, and these are great sponsors. I've seen some sponsors that realize someone is in such a state that they realize, okay, we're going to make this amend. Like the sponsor gives you the permission. Like I've seen them say, okay, like if someone has stole something from their boss and they're scared to death or something and whatever, or, this sort of thing. And it's just like, okay, this person's going to drink if we don't get this off his mind. Right.
yeah,
And so
right,
they'll take some time and they'll write it out and they'll think through it and they'll make sure they'll get all the facts and they'll do that. And so the beautiful thing about the program is if you have a really good spiritually fit sponsor, is they might give you the permission to jump ahead to just, because the other thing, because see, they know the allergy. Like if they're really being honest with them, then they can spot something and go, oh, I've seen this before. This is danger zone. Like we gotta do some work on this because
yeah.
you're in an acute situation.
Well, and that's why. So there is a caveat here about what I'm about to say. Okay, so I generally don't subscribe to the idea of slow sobriety, which is the process where you'll see people will take, like, they'll do a step a month, right? So we're gonna, like, you'll hear this in my area. I know this happens in a lot of places, but like, say if somebody's brand new and they get to working with a sponsor, and their sponsor says, "We're going to do this one step a month. So we're going to work on the first step for the first 30 days. And then the next 30 days, we're going to work on the second step. And then the next 30 days after that, we're going to work on the third step. And then 4 months in, we're going to start doing the fourth step. And then at 5 months, we're going to do the fifth step. And then 6 months, like, so I don't believe in that, generally speaking, because we're talking about a deadly illness. And so, like, in your case, you've been around, the ropes. You're basically an old timer who has had a few slips. So I would say in your case, I'd probably do the same thing, right?
Well, and I did it with my sponsor,
Right.
who sponsored,
Yes.
got to be over 100 men by now. He agreed because he knew me ahead of time and he's like, I've seen you have great. One of the things he gave permission, he's like, I've seen you have great sobriety.
Right.
So, and I've had people that know me like, no, you've had it. Like you don't have to whip yourself and,
Right.
I'm like, you had it, but let's find those areas where you didn't. And he also knew my spiritual program has been so strong. We have a lot of great talks about that. Like my spiritual program has been so strong that and I talked to him that one of my patterns is I sprint so fast
Yes.
that he's like, and one of the things I've got is steadfastness and slowness. He's like, yeah, let's slow you down, man.
Yeah.
And so,
right.
yeah,
The books do that, by the way. It does say that. It says a guy may be so eager that he wants to get to work right now and he wants to do it all right now. It may be a mistake. It does say that in the book.
yeah.
So it is quite urgent that we get to work and do this stuff. And I know there's a guy that I sponsor who's like, or a guy I work with who's like, I don't know, 27 years sober. Right? I don't know why the hell he asked me to work with him, but I work with him. And he is definitely alcoholic. He ended up going through the all of the 12 steps in the first week of his sobriety. Okay. And he's stayed sober the whole time. And he's one of He's the guy that introduced me to a deeper understanding of the conversations with God stuff and stuff like that. So he's a great dude. I love the guy, and he's solid dude, right? But he understood that this wasn't a like run through and we're done. This is a way of life, right? But he went through those first 12 steps in the first week. So I've seen it happen, and it was originally kind of designed to kind of go through to alleviate the pain, and then like once you're kind of through, if you want to go back and revisit some of this stuff, you got plenty of room for that, right?
Well, you got a lifetime to work it. And the key
Yeah.
that I like, which is that this program is suggested only, but it's not one size fits all. And that's why you need that sponsor that you trust, has seen lots of different types, and you try and go through that, because, you know, there are some people that, you know, are ready for it, need to do it, and they might need to get to those 8 and 9 steps real quick, or they're going to get drunk. You know, at least start something there. And, you know, but like I'll say, as I've gone slowly here, we meet in person every week live, and then we're in a meeting together. We meet in person every week, and I call him if something comes up. But he's been giving me, as I'm sharing honestly with him, he's been having me, hey, let's work on this. Like, let's, like, things with my wife, say, okay, let's work on this. You know, work on me. Like, let's get a little plan of action around this. Why don't you do X, Y? Let's work on X, Y, Z, you know? And so it's not as if you just start hanging out on your laurels or whatever. There's a lot of, because there's so many things you can be doing without even a formal amends, but there's ways you're living your life to start being a better human being to people.
Yeah, I mean, like the 11th step interview stuff, some of that I can introduce to a guy right away. You know what I mean? Like, we can have him just running through some motions. Sometimes it's like my first sponsor, he gave me a prayer sheet. I didn't know what the hell prayer was. He said, I like you wake up every morning, the first thing you do, hit your knees and start just reading this out loud, and maybe start doing some prayer in this way. He wanted me to take some spiritual actions. He wanted me to start embody make some spiritual habits, right? And he wanted me to get used to just working some action. And that's, again, like, and I think, well, even like with the guys I work with, I told you this morning, like, right away, I'll ask them, what is a meeting for? And they'll say, well, a meeting's a place where I can go and listen to some wisdom and get some good nuggets of information. And, you know, and I'm like, no, that is partly what a meeting is for. A meeting is primarily a place for you to go to and to be of service. And I want them to know that as soon as possible. We're hitting on that immediately, and it's being hit over and over. So right from day one, we're talking a lot about the allergy and the obsession of the mind and how to be of service. Allergy, obsession, how to be of service, over and over and over and over. And I'd like you to start doing some prayer stuff. And I want you to call me in the beginning for like 30 days straight. I don't care if it's even for you to say, I fucking hate you, goodbye. And I don't care what it is. I just need you to do something so that we can start embodying a change, right? And that's been very successful, because I just want the guys' feet to start moving, right? And then we sit down together, and I meet with them at least once a week, and we sit together and we read a chapter each time inside of an hour and a half or so, and we go through, and when a step comes up, we take the step. And that's how I like to do this. That's how my sponsor did it with me. And so it's been really helpful. And what I've learned is the way I've come to understand this stuff is the first through the 9th step, which is, to me, those are the fundamentals of the game. So I like to look at it kind of like maybe baseball, right? I got to know what a glove is. I got to know what a ball is, a bat. I want to know what it means to hit a foul, what it means to hit a home run, what's a grand slam. I need to know what these fundamentals of the game are, so that I know how, once I can step out on the field, I can actually start playing. So the first 9 steps are the fundamentals of the game that get me acquainted with the tools for this design for living. And then when I hit 10, 11, 12, then I can start playing the game. And also the way I understand it is once I hit step 6 and 7, I'm already stepping into 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Because I can start working 10, 11, 12 as soon as I start making amends. So all of that stuff, and it's a design for living, and I get to stay in the game, and that's the joy of it, and that's the pain of it. So it's all that wrapped up in this thing where I get to actually experience life in this new way of living. And what I find is, even when it's a pain in the ass, it's amazing when I come out the other side. Because what I find is I'm just so damn dramatic, and I'm amplifying all this garbage. I'm awfulizing everything, catastrophizing, making the smallest stuff the big stuff, and I'm minimizing the big stuff into small stuff. And so I can't afford to live my life based on how I feel. I need to live my life based on trying to follow principles. And when I do that, it changes everything.
Yeah, man. Good stuff, Chad.
Yeah, it was good. It felt pretty good. I felt like I was a little rocky there in the beginning, but that's okay.
You know why? You care about it so much.
Yeah.
And you have a lot that you want to share, which is good. That's why we're having these conversations, and we'll roll this out. I think next week we can. I think we're probably next time we talk, let's start getting into the steps.
For sure.
I think we can start, kind of working down, because we've kind of thrown some. We kind of mentioned them, but we've thrown some numbers out there. But I think we can talk about, what the steps. And I know you've got a lot of great wisdom on that and some experience, and we can kind of share back and forth on that. Because I think people are curious.
Yeah.
But hopefully people got a little bit about what really is alcoholism and some of the unique things, why we need it, and the unique thing that it just, for whatever it is, for those of us that are chronic, the only thing that seems to help us is God. And so, what a lot we are, Chad.
Yeah.
And you know what? A grateful lot. So I'm so, and then people say, and I know you mean this, like, I didn't really get it, but I'm grateful because it's in these pits that I've hit. God has just met me, and it has opened me up to things that I don't think I ever would have gotten had I not gone down these paths. So neither regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it is one thing they say in our book. And so what a beautiful thing we've been given.
God is so gracious. He'll let me stub my face into the wall as many times as I need.
Yeah.
He knows I don't want an easy answer.
Oh man, I can relate. Thanks, Chad. It's always great talking to you. We'll continue.
All right,
Love you, brother.
Have a good one. Love you.